The showroom smelled like money. That was the first thing you noticed when you walked through the glass doors of Meridian Motors on Lakeside Drive. The faint, deliberate scent of leather and polish and something floral that cost more per bottle than most people spent on groceries. The floors were white marble, buffed to a mirror finish. The cars sat on low platforms under surgical lighting, each one angled just so, each one gleaming like a religious object. A place designed to make you feel lucky just for being allowed to look. Calvin Reeves parked his truck at the far end of the lot, away from the front spaces, the way he always did. Not out of humility, out of habit. He had spent 40 years moving through spaces like this one. Spaces that were not built for him and did not expect him. And he had learned long ago that the way a man enters a room matters less than what he carries inside it. He stepped down from the cab, straightened the collar of his work shirt, and walked toward the glass. He was 63 years old. His coveralls were clean but faded at the knees, the name patch on the chest worn smooth by 1,000 washings. His boots had been resoled twice. His hands, even scrubbed, held the ghosts of oil in the creases of his knuckles. He carried no briefcase, no folder. Just a man with an errand on a Saturday afternoon, walking at a pace that suited him. Through the glass, a young man in a slim-cut suit watched him cross the lot. His name was Preston Hale, and he was 29 years old and very good at reading a room. He had been in automotive sales for 4 years, and in those 4 years he had learned the taxonomy of customers the way a biologist learns species. There were buyers, and there were browsers, and there were time wasters. And the time wasters wore work clothes and drove trucks with cracked dashboards. And they came in on Saturdays to walk the floor and touch things they would never purchase and leave without so much as a business card. He watched the old man in the coveralls push through the door. He did not move from his position near the flagship display model. He let the door swing shut and waited. The showroom receptionist, a young woman named Alicia, looked up from her desk and offered a professional smile. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Meridian Motors. Can I help you find something today?" Calvin smiled back. "Thank you. I am looking for whoever handles fleet orders." Alicia blinked once. "Fleet orders. That is right." Preston materialized at her shoulder, smooth as a man who had been waiting for a cue. He studied Calvin the way you study a thing you have already classified. His eyes moved from the coveralls to the boots to the hands and back up, and the calculation behind them was fast and final. He smiled the smile of a man who has decided to be patient with someone. "Sir," he said, "those conversations typically happen at the corporate level. Do you have an account with us already?" Calvin looked at him. "No. That is why I am here." "Right," Preston said, drawing the word out just slightly. "And what kind of fleet are we talking about?" He said it the way a teacher asks a student to spell a difficult word. Gently, expecting the mistake. Calvin folded his hands on the reception counter. 240 vehicles, primarily service vans and light-duty pickups, 18-month delivery cycle, hard fleet pricing, maintenance contract included. The number sat in the air between them. Preston's smile did not change, but something behind it did. A small recalculation, a tiny doubt, and then, because 4 years of habit is stronger than 1 moment of doubt, he smoothed it over and kept going. 240, he repeated. He glanced at Alicia without meaning to. "That is a significant order." "Yes," Calvin said. "It is, and you represent which company?" "My own," Preston nodded slowly. "And what does your company do, if you don't mind my asking?" "It is a logistics operation. We run regional distribution across 11 states. Preston studied the coveralls again. The faded knees, the worn name patch. His mouth moved toward the next sentence before his brain had fully approved it. "Sir, orders at that volume go through our commercial division. They have a whole process. There are financials to verify, fleet agreements to negotiate." It is not really a walk-in situation. Calvin looked at him steadily. That is why I called ahead. I have an appointment with your commercial director, a man named Roger Falk. 3 o'clock. Preston went very still. Alicia checked her screen. She found the name. She found the appointment. She looked up at Preston with an expression he would remember for a long time. Preston recovered quickly. Of course, I apologize for the confusion. Let me just get Mr. Falk for you. He walked away toward the back offices with measured steps. Calvin watched him go, then turned and looked at the showroom floor. A white SUV on the nearest platform, an electric coupe beside it, long and silver. He had driven cars like these for 30 years. He had never owned one, not because he could not afford it, but because he had never seen the point. You drove a thing to get somewhere. A truck got him where he needed to go. He had built Reeves Regional Logistics out of a single van and a territory. Nobody else. Wanted the rural stretch between 3 mid-sized cities where the ground was bad and the margins were thin, and every other company had looked at the map and shaken their heads. Calvin had looked at the same map and seen something different. He had seen what was missing. 14 years later, Reeves Regional ran 412 vehicles across 11 states, employed over 800 people, and held contracts with 3 of the country's largest retailers. The fleet was aging. He needed to replace a significant portion of it, and he wanted to consolidate to a single manufacturer for the first time. He had called Meridian's commercial line 2 weeks ago. He had spoken with Roger Falk himself. He had driven 90 minutes this afternoon with a folder on the passenger seat containing the preliminary contract terms. He had worn the coveralls because it was Saturday, and on Saturdays he worked the warehouse floor at the Clarksburg hub alongside his crew, the same way he had done since the first year of the business. He was not trying to prove something. He simply had not seen a reason to change. Preston came back from the offices alone. Mr. Falk is in a call right now, he said. He will be another few minutes. Calvin nodded. Preston stood there a moment longer than he needed to. He was deciding something, and the decision he made was the kind that comes from a place deeper than reason, from the part of a man that his better judgment has never quite reached. "Can I ask?" he said, keeping his voice low and pleasant. "Who referred you to us? For a fleet this size, we usually work through established relationships." Calvin looked at him. "Roger Falk called me. His regional VP gave him my name." Preston's eyebrows moved a fraction. "And your company is based locally?" "Clarksburg. Main office. We have 7 other facilities." Preston tilted his head. "Reeves Regional, you said?" "I did not say." But yes, a pause. Preston smiled the smile again, the careful one. "I am just not familiar with the name." "Most people are not," Calvin said. "We like it that way." Another man appeared now, drifting over from the sales floor, a senior rep named Garrison Cole, who was 45 and had been at Meridian for 11 years and had the easy authority of a man who runs a room without being asked. He had heard enough from the reception desk to form his own conclusions, and his conclusions rhymed with Preston's. Garrison stopped beside Preston and looked at Calvin with the studied pleasantness of a man who intends to be useful in a specific and limited way. "Good afternoon," he said. "I understand there may have been some miscommunication about the fleet inquiry." Calvin turned to look at him. There was no miscommunication. "Of course," Garrison said, nodding. "Sometimes these things get routed through the wrong channel. A fleet order of that scale would normally originate with a formal proposal from your procurement team, submitted through our commercial portal. We do not typically handle it on the showroom floor." "I was not asking to handle it on the showroom floor," Calvin said. "I was asking to see Roger Falk, with whom I have an appointment confirmed at 3 o'clock. Garrison smiled without showing his teeth. "Of course, I just want to make sure expectations are calibrated." A 200-unit order requires proof of financing, company registration, insurance certificates. It is quite a process. We would not want anyone to feel misled about how involved it becomes. Calvin looked at Garrison the way a man looks at weather, patient, unbothered. I have been running a fleet for 14 years, he said. I am aware of the documentation involved. Garrison glanced at the coveralls, at the boots. He made a choice. I am sure you are, he said. Do you happen to have any of that documentation with you today? I have the preliminary contract terms we discussed with Mr. Falk's office. Calvin reached into his shirt pocket and produced a folded piece of paper. He did not unfold it. Garrison reached for it, a smooth, automatic gesture, the way a man reaches for something he expects to be given. Calvin did not hand it over. It is for Mr. Falk, Calvin said. A moment passed between them, small and precise as a cut. Of course, Garrison said. He withdrew his hand. He and Preston exchanged a look that did not need words. It was the look of two men who have agreed on something without speaking. The way people agree on things in rooms when they believe they are the only ones watching. I will let you know when he is available, Garrison said, and he walked away toward the back again, unhurried. Preston lingered. He could not quite let it go. Something in the math of the situation still did not settle for him, and rather than sit with the discomfort, he walked toward resolution. You know, he said. His voice dropped to the register people use for advice for this kind of arrangement. There are often smaller regional suppliers who are a better fit. Less overhead, simpler process. I would hate for you to make a long drive for something that might not be the right match. Calvin turned and looked at him fully, looked at him for a long moment. Son, he said, I appreciate the concern, but I have made longer drives for smaller returns. Preston opened his mouth. He did not get to use it. Calvin. The voice came from behind them both, and it was fast and warm and slightly out of breath. The voice of a man who has just been told something that made him move quickly through a building. Roger Falk was 51, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and he crossed the showroom floor with the look of a man who was acutely aware of how long he had been in that call, and even more acutely aware of who was standing at his reception desk. He extended his hand while he was still 6 feet away. I am so sorry. My call ran over. I should have had Alicia come get me the moment you arrived. He shook Calvin's hand with both of his own. It is genuinely good to meet you in person. Please come through. I have everything set up. He gestured toward the corridor that led to the commercial offices, and the gesture was the kind a man makes for a person he has been looking forward to meeting. Not for someone he is accommodating, not for someone he is tolerating, for someone whose time he respects and whose business he wants and whose presence in his building is an occasion. Calvin followed him. He passed Preston without looking at him. Preston stood very still in the middle of the showroom floor and watched the old man in the coveralls walk with the commercial director through. The door marked private and disappear. Garrison appeared at his shoulder. The two of them stood there, in the silence of the showroom under the surgical lights, surrounded by gleaming machines. What did Falk say? Preston asked. Garrison's voice came out flat and careful. He said Reeves Regional Logistics is a 400-vehicle operation. He said the contract on the table is worth $11 million over the cycle. And he said the founder called him directly, which is the only reason he flew in from Chicago today. Preston looked at the door through which Calvin had disappeared. He is the founder, Garrison said. The showroom seemed to exhale. The white SUV on the nearest platform reflected the ceiling lights in a long, perfect arc. The electric coupe beside it held its silver silence. Outside, through the glass, Calvin's old truck sat in the far corner of the lot where he had parked it out of habit, out of the deep, practiced habit of a man who had learned that where you park does not determine where you end up. Preston would replay the next 40 minutes many times in the months that followed. The way Falk's assistant walked through to collect additional materials. The way voices rose and fell behind the closed door of the commercial office. The way Roger Falk appeared in the corridor entrance at one point and looked across the floor at the two of them with an expression that was not quite anger and was not quite pity, but was somewhere between the two and worse than either. Preston was called into Falk's office at the end of it. Not Garrison. Preston alone. He sat across from a desk covered in documents, and Falk stood at the window with his jacket still on and his back to the room. The man you kept in the lobby for 20 minutes, Falk said, did not look at him. Has a confirmed order for 240 vehicles with a gross value to this dealership of $11 million over 18 months. He is also, and I want you to hear this clearly, the personal friend of 3 members of our National Fleet Board. He called one of them on the way to your showroom this morning. Casually, the way people call friends, Falk turned around. He is not going to make a complaint. He is not that kind of man. He told me as much himself. He said he had driven 90 minutes and the contract was already drafted, and he was not going to let one conversation on a showroom floor undo a business decision he had already made. He said it quietly, which somehow made it worse. Preston's hands were in his lap. He is signing, Falk said. The contract is good, but I want you to understand something. And I want you to carry it with you, because I do not think you are a bad person. I think you are a person who made a very fast decision based on what a man was wearing, and that decision almost cost this dealership $11 million and very likely would have cost me a friendship I have been building for 2 years. He sat down. A man in a uniform is still a man. The uniform does not tell you a single thing about what is underneath it. You did not ask him a question. You told him what he was. He opened a folder on his desk. The meeting is over. Preston walked back through the corridor and into the showroom and stood for a moment near the reception desk. Alicia did not look up. The showroom floor hummed with its controlled, expensive silence. Through the glass wall of the commercial conference room, Calvin Reeves sat at the far end of a long table, his coveralls a soft contrast to the room's polished surfaces. He was leaning forward slightly, reading something on the desk in front of him. His pen moved once deliberately at the bottom of a page. Then he sat back, and for a moment he simply looked out through the glass. Not at Preston, at nothing in particular. The look of a man who has done what he came to do and is thinking, quietly, about the drive home. His truck was still in the far corner of the lot. It would need an oil change soon. He made a note to get that done on Tuesday after the morning shift. He signed the second page. Outside, the late afternoon light came down gold and flat across the dealership, the way light does at the end of a long Saturday. It touched the white marble floor through the glass and pulled long, pale shapes across the showroom. Calvin Reeves capped his pen, slid the folder back across the table, thanked Roger Falk with the handshake of a man who means it, not because the deal was done, but because the drive had been worth it after all. He was back in his truck by 4:15. The radio found a gospel station, and he left it there. He drove home the same way he had driven out, no faster and no slower, with the easy patience of a man who had learned long ago that the destination does not change based on how urgently you chase it. In the showroom behind him, Preston Hale stood by the reception desk for a long time, looking at nothing. The marble floor was very clean and very bright and very quiet. That was the thing about rooms like that one. They were built to make you feel lucky just for being allowed to look. Some men walk in and they are looked at. Some men walk in and the room does not yet know what it is looking at. The difference is not in the room. It was never in the room.